Arabesque is a spy movie starring Gregory Peck, Sophia Loren, and Alan Badel. We see car chases, cranes used as weapons, zoo animals, broken fish tanks, a drug-induced escape, a very devious villain, an Arab prime minister, a beautiful spy, or is she, truth serum, and more. Hi, this is Dan.
And Tom.
From our podcast, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies, and our website, spymovienavigator.com, the premier go-to resources for spy movie fans. All right, join us as we decode this 1966 movie, Arabesque. This one has a lot of spy movie tropes for us to discuss.
Okay, now, Dan, for me, the big question is, how did a movie based on the Alex Gordon novel, The Cipher, end up being called Arabesque? I mean, I think of Arabesque as a dance position, and there's no dancing in this movie.
Yeah. If it has anything to do with dancing or ballet or anything else, I'll be shocked. Anyway, let's decode the movie first, and then we'll discuss this because there's a lot of good stuff there about why it should be called Arabesque, I think. All right.
Okay, that makes sense. We'll hit that later then. Now,
all right.
I want to start off by saying I actually like this movie,
okay,
but it's not likely to be a movie that I'm going to think of when I'm trying to decide what movie to watch. Right?
Okay.
Do I need to watch it again? I don't know. I'm glad I watched it. I mean, it definitely has its strengths. Sophia Loren's performance makes it really worth watching. It has tension and comedy, and the comedy usually works, but the plot is, I'll just say, a little convoluted.
A little convoluted?
A little.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
It's a serpentine.
Yes.
It's a labyrinth.
It's a labyrinth. All of that said, if you're a spy movie fan and haven't seen Arabesque, I think it's worth a watch. And as of the recording of this episode, Arabesque is available on Amazon Prime here in the US. So, Dan, I kind of liked it. Think it's a little squirrely. What'd you think of this one?
All right. This is one of these movies that I have a hard time with sometimes. I'm looking at it thinking, okay, it actually was a pretty good movie, but man, try to figure out what the heck is going on. Now, sometimes that's good. It's an absolutely baffling spy movie. Meaning there are so many twists and turns, it really is difficult to figure out ahead of time what's going on, which, okay, like I said, sometimes that's a good thing in a way, right? You must pay attention, though, to every detail, every step of the way, and you might still be confused. It's amusing with some light moments, some corny lines, and some influences from Bond and Hitchcock movies for sure, and repetitive camera shots using reflection as a main element, which, wow, I mean, there's a lot in this movie. So let's dive into the movie a bit and start with a high-level look at the plot of Arabesque. At the start, we see the murder of Professor Raghib, a hieroglyphics expert. He was killed during an eye exam.
An eye exam?
That's the first we've seen of that.
You must give me the name of your oculist.
Okay. Yeah, or not. I definitely don't want to get the name of Professor Raghib's oculist.
No. All right. Then we see another cipher or decoding expert named David Pollock. Now, he's an American teaching in London, and Pollock is played by Gregory Peck, who's always outstanding in his movies, but we're going to talk a little bit about Gregory Peck as a selection here. After giving a lecture, substituting for the deceased Professor Raghib, Pollock gets approached to help decipher some hieroglyphics. He declines, but is later induced into taking on the task. Therefore, he ends up being, oh my God, a reluctant spy.
Huh. Well, you say, oh my God, we see the reluctant spy in many spy movies.
Yeah.
In part because it really works. We'll drill into this more a little bit later in this episode.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any harm in a reluctant spy.
I don't either, but we've seen it. We've seen it many times before this movie, for sure, with all the Hitchcock stuff. Anyway, in this case, as is often the case, the reluctant spy really gets into their role. But here, I'm a little surprised. He was just like running with it, calm, cool, and mostly in control. I thought that was a little out of character in terms of what might really happen to a real person who gets roped into this kind of thing.
Okay, wait a second, though, Dan. We just talked about the Union. And one of our critiques of the Union was that Mark Wahlberg's character kept asking questions because he didn't know, because he was a reluctant spy.
Yeah.
So you need something in between, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure, but I think he was just I don't know. It just seemed like, okay, yeah, I'm in this now, and this is fine. I'm okay. And he was calm and cool the whole time. We'll see as we go through this. It turns out that this thing he has to decipher is very important, of course. We won't tell you why it's important, but it is the MacGuffin of the movie. Gotta have that.
Gotta have the MacGuffin.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this villain, he's
Villain.
named Najim Bishravi,
Yeah.
and he's played by Alan Badel. He's the main antagonist who had Pollock hired to decode the message written in hieroglyphics. I mean, this guy, he's really smarmy. He likes to buy people to work for him,
Hmm.
and he seems to have a shoe fetish. And really, footwear becomes an important plot point in Arabesque.
Yeah, it's a great read on the footwear there, Tom, because, yeah, keep that in mind as you're watching this movie, because I have to say, this Bishravi guy with his dark sunglasses, if you look at him, he kept reminding me of Peter Sellers, maybe like in Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah.
And Alan Badel has the same shaped head and everything else. I mean, it actually looks like Peter Sellers here. And I had a hard time taking him seriously in Arabesque when I was thinking of this. I mean, it's just like I'm thinking.
I thought the same thing. I mean,
Oh, okay.
especially with the first shot of him
Yeah,
when he comes into
yeah,
the door.
yeah,
I mean, I was positive it was Sellers.
yeah,
I mean, and I'd wondered if they tried to get Peter Sellers for this role and couldn't.
yeah.
That said, I don't think Peter Sellers would have been a good fit for this role.
No. I
But
don't either. But
initially, I did think it was Peter Sellers, and
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
actually
I
glad
know.
it wasn't based on how the role plays out.
Yeah. It was amazing. All right, next up we see the lead female in the role, Yasmin Azir, played by, oh yeah, Sophia Loren. She has probably the most fun role in this movie. Yasmin is purposefully aloof to help disguise who she really is, and the screenwriters made it very difficult to figure out who she really is. You have to
Yeah,
pay.
you really got to
Yeah,
pay attention.
you will never, you won't figure it out. You have to pay very close attention during the first half of the movie to kind of identify which side she's really on, or maybe on. Well, you really don't know. And even that might throw you, because more twists and turns are thrown at you later. Actually, constantly.
Yeah, she's a very confusing character, but she's really fun in the movie.
She
All
is.
right. So now, those are the three main players, and we get them early on in the movie. But we don't know why the hieroglyphic is so important for Pollock to decode. And that's common in a MacGuffin, right? You don't exactly
Yep.
know. I mean, think about the rabbit's foot, right? It's
Yeah.
something somebody needs to get to. Now, along the way, we do see murders, chases, a hallucination, a scene at a racetrack, and what could have been a hilarious shower scene, I think.
Oh, could have been. Actually, yeah, I like the shower scene. Gregory Peck as Pollock was, I thought, great in this scene. Watch his eyes and where they move as he tries to remain cool in a very awkward situation. I mean, Sophia Loren is in the shower with nothing on. Of course, we don't see all that. We see her back. And he's in the shower with her, with Yasmin, Sophia's character. And he is fully clothed, and her, of course, not. And with the risk of getting caught. Now, my friend Kevin told me his mother told him when he was young that, quote, a woman's greatest asset is a man's imagination. All right, you can see his imagination at work through his eyes, even though he was in a precarious situation. It was a great scene, balanced, I think, perfectly with the humor and intensity. I
Okay,
thought it was good.
we'll talk more about this scene a little bit later when we talk about the casting, and we can readdress this point.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I think this would have been much funnier if one of the characters in that scene was played by a different actor.
Well, I know you're not going to pick Sophia Loren to be substituted out.
Never want to
So
substitute
you'd
her
be
out.
crazy to do that. All
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
I want to hear your thoughts on that one too, because we're going to talk about it. Anyway, we have the main plot here. People are getting killed over some hieroglyphic message. Pollock has to decipher the message. Some people are willing to go to great lengths to stop this from happening. There are many twists and turns, as we said, and I think we can leave the plot there to not spoil the movie for you. Just know that the plot is, as Tom said, a bit complex.
Yeah, really. All right. And in fact, since we're talking about that, let's talk about what works and what doesn't work in Arabesque.
All right.
And so I'm going to start with the what works section here, right? Let's talk about
Yeah.
things like the technical aspects of Arabesque, because I think they were done quite well. I think we have a little bit difference on this first one that I want to talk about, which is the visual. I think it was a visually fun movie to watch. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
for me, the camera work is really good and helps focus the viewer on what director Stanley Donen wanted us to see. I
Okay.
mean, many shots are taken in mirrors and
Yeah.
prisms or through glass, which distorts the image.
Yeah. I thought that was an interesting thing about 100 times, but 200 or 300 times, I thought it was a little too much.
See, I kind of liked it because everything's kind of convoluted in this story. So having the visual being a little
Well,
convoluted,
that's a nice connection. I like that. That's good.
I kind of
I
like
like
that.
that connection. That's good. All
Yeah.
right. Go ahead.
Now, so the cinematographer on this was Christopher Chalice, and he won a BAFTA for his work on Arabesque.
Yeah.
Now, we talk about this filming of this thing. Writer Peter Stone said that Stanley Donen, quote, shot it better than he ever shot any picture. Everything was shot as though it were a reflection in a Rolls Royce headlamp, unquote.
Yeah.
Donen himself described his technique as, quote, I had hoped to avoid any sign of the studio manner this time. So I tried something like the living camera technique. The handheld camera had been used a lot lately, especially in Europe. But the trouble had been too much wobble because the operator has to carry the sheer weight of the camera while he's working. One of our boys had the idea of suspending the camera to give the operator all of the mobility of the hand camera without the weight. Arabesque is sort of going to the extreme until it almost makes you sick.
Yeah.
Granted, we did do some interesting photographic things, unquote. So, I mean, he's kind of acknowledging what you're saying here. You think it went to the extreme, and I
Okay.
think
Okay.
he's telling us here where they were trying to push the envelope.
Okay. All right.
And they did this in part because of the use of reflective surfaces and this vibrant color palettes. I mean, it kind of started here and became more common in spy movies and thrillers following Arabesque. I mean, think about something like the Casino Royale spoof.
Mhm.
That might not have been as vibrant without Arabesque.
Yeah,
But
maybe. All right.
Arabesque kind of
I,
set the stage for that.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that the movie The Ipcris File, which was released a year earlier, also had some similar camera shots. So, did the Ipcris File influence the filming of Arabesque? Maybe. All right. Hey, I thought the opening title sequence was a combination, if you look at it, and it's kind of cool. It was a combination of Dr. No, You Only Live Twice, and a smidge of Casino Royale that comes later. So Dr. No is the only one that came first. But I think you see this, and you see the colors, you see the patterns, and everything else. It kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting combination.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
hadn't thought of that.
yeah. All right. Next, we know you'll be shocked to hear that the Henry Mancini score was excellent. It was. If you have Mancini doing your score, come on, it's likely to be good.
You're
As
in
it
good
was,
hands.
yeah, and it was in Arabesque. Other espionage movies that Mancini scored included Charade, the Pink Panther movies, and The Great Spy Mission, also known as Operation Crossbow. So it's got a lot of experience. For Arabesque, the score is a mashup of orchestra, pop, and jazz. It's serious when the movie is, and it's playful when the movie's tone changes. And it does not interfere with the movie. I like it when the scores are there in the background, but you notice them as part of the movie and the story. And that to me is successful here. It's not interfering with the story.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And especially the opening theme. I
Yeah.
mean, that sets up the movie well. I mean, there's this driving undertone in this thing, and then there's horns and violins that go on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the whole score, not just the opening, but the opening I really liked.
It's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole score helps set the mood of the scenes very well.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is, so when we talk about technical stuff, is costuming, right? So the costuming was definitely of the times, the 1960s, and did add to the movie.
Yeah. All right. It must be tough to be a costumer and have to dress Sophia Loren.
Or in the case of the shower undresser.
Yeah, right. I think her wardrobe ensemble though was all Christian Dior. So that's pretty cool stuff though she had on. I have to say
Yeah.
she looked good in every
Yeah,
scene.
absolutely. Now, Sophia Loren supposedly wanted Yasmin to have 20 pairs of shoes. So they ended up writing a scene about her shoes that ended up being a mix of erotic and a little bit odd. And some of the camera shots in this scene are fairly erotic here. But it was a great scene with Bashravi having a great interplay with Yasmin. And we really got to see.
It's a good scene.
Yeah, we got to see the chemistry between those. So this scene I really thought was excellent. It was a bit risque. And we said shoes are important in this movie.
Yeah.
This scene helps set it up, and you don't realize it.
Yeah, you don't realize it. Yeah, shoe fetishes are always a little risque, I think. All right. Maybe the movie should have been called ARABESQUE.
Oh, jeez. Wait, no, actually, I kind of like that.
All right.
All right. So that's about how technically sound Arabesque is. It also received praise for its entertainment value. The script's convoluted, but it is entertaining. It's a fun movie to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the chemistry between the main actors is another positive, I think, of Arabesque, mainly driven by the interaction of both Pollock and Bashravi with Yasmin. That I thought that played off really well, especially with combining three interactions like that. I think that was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And three strong actors.
Yeah, we think this is a fantastic role for Sophia Loren, and she has very good and very different chemistry with Gregory Peck and Alan Badel. Beck plays the reluctant spy trying to figure things out, while somewhat falling for Yasmin. Of course, you got to have that romantic interest in there, right? We have seen all of this going all the way back to 1935 and the 39th step. So, okay, we're seeing
now,
it again.
Yeah. Now, one thing I like about this is, we talk about, you say the romance. The romance isn't over the top. It's not the key point of the thing. It kind of just happens along the way. And that's the way I like to see it.
Yeah. You're right. It's good. Now, Badel is a controlling character for sure, and Yasmin seems to be drawn into his charms. At least this is what we're looking at, and we're thinking, "Wow, okay." Yet
especially in that shoe scene.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, the chemistry between the male leads and Sophia Loren is quite strong, as we said. This is great to see, especially with the male leads being so different. We credit Sophia Loren really for being able to spark that chemistry with these very different men. And she does it well throughout the movie. No hiccups. She's just great.
Yeah, it definitely works.
The casting is sometimes reviewed as a positive, but also sometimes reviewed as a negative. We'll discuss the positives here and then the negatives while we talk about what didn't work in this movie. All right. As we mentioned, Sophia Loren and Alan Badel were spot on for their characters. Sophia Loren received a lot of praise for her performance as Yasmin. People liked her charisma, which made the Yasmin character pop. As we've already said, her chemistry with the male leads earned her praise. People also liked her style, wardrobe, like we said, Christian Dior, and obviously it worked well on Sophia Loren. Loren also received praise for her versatility. Arabesque jumps between drama and comedy, and Loren handles this balancing act really well.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I thought she was fantastic in this movie. And I think Alan Badel playing Bashravi, he received mostly positive, but some mixed reviews. I mean, because Bashravi likes to buy people, and he's played very low key, and some of the reviews were, "Oh, he's a little too smarmy," but I think that was the character.
Yeah, that was a character. I thought he was great.
And so, for me, I thought the understated way that Badel played this villain was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very different villain than the one we see in most spy movies, in that his character wasn't over the top, yet remained understated.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do. And Badel is a fantastic actor who has a fantastic resume both on stage and on film.
Mm-hmm.
And here he played a menacing villain quite well.
Yeah, I do.
And, Dan, just a really quick one, I'm going back, when I first saw him, I thought he was Peter Sellers. And Badel has been called one of the best ever English actors. And I think this guy is a great villain. And as you're watching it, with as smarmy as he is, you just want to punch him in the face. I mean, even in scenes when he's not being villainous, when he's just being a smarmy jerk, right?
Yeah.
And having someone like Alan Badel plays this character was a really wise choice.
Yeah. I mean, the fact you want to punch him in the face shows how good he is,
Yeah.
Hey. All right. We should also point out that Vic Armstrong is Gregory Peck's stunt double.
Oh,
in a
Vic,
horse riding scene in this movie, right? This was Vic's first movie part. He had been a jockey before this, so his doubling the horse riding made sense. Armstrong's second movie was, you ready? You only live twice. And he took off on quite a prolific movie stunt career, moving from a stunt performer in Arabesque and George Lazenby's double in On Her Majesty's Secret Service to stunt coordinator in numerous James Bond movies, Superman, Indiana Jones movies, Jack Ryan movies, The Amazing Spider-Man, and many more. Pretty cool. So Vic is the stunt rider for Peck here doing the horse riding. Another famous horse riding stunt he did was in Never Say Never Again when he rode the horse off the castle wall. So very nice to see where Vic Armstrong got his start.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be able to see that and be able to call it out. I also like, Dan, we're talking about going back in time here a little bit, is that there's a reference to an old poem that first appeared in London in 1784.
Yeah, I like that too, and we of course we had to go look that up and find out what it was, and it was a real poem that they're referencing in this movie, and it was from 1784. All right, so let's move on to what did not work. We'll start with the plot. Yeah. All right, let's just say this story is tough to follow. It seems like they thought of a bunch of this would be cool ideas, but trying to string them together into an intelligent story of twists and turns, I don't know, it didn't quite work. Plus, it was hard to figure out who was on what side, which again made it hard to follow. Good that you must guess. I like that. And you can't figure it out, kind of, is cool. But they made it so difficult you could never guess what was going to happen, which is, again, like I said, okay, there's that balance, and this was tough.
Well, Dan, one of the things though is the male leads, which side they're on. It's everybody else you don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it almost seemed to me that they were writing it as they went along, throwing in another idea here and there. I mean,
Well, that's because they were right. I mean, this script wasn't finished when they started filming.
There you go.
Which is actually fairly common. I mean, you think about Quantum of Solace, right? That
I
script
think The
wasn't
Spy
done
Who
when
Loved
they,
Me, I think too. Yeah.
yeah. So it's a fairly common thing that the script's not done, but there was a lot of it that wasn't done when they started.
Yeah, I mean, really, the script was a mess. I guess that goes hand in hand with the plot issues because really, Stanley Donen said Cary Grant didn't want to be in this movie. It wasn't a good script, and I didn't want to make it, he said. But Gregory Peck and Sophia Loren, who I love, wanted to be in it, and the studio implored me to make it because they said it's ridiculous not to make a film with Peck and Sophia. so so he did it. They said it would make money, and they were right. So he did it. Like, wow. All right.
Yeah. Now, just to give you an idea, the script for this thing I've read cost over $400,000 at the time.
Wow.
And Donovan was also quoted as saying, quote, "Our only hope is to make it so visually exciting the audience will never have time to work out what the hell is going on."
Okay, so
Unquote.
there you go.
And they succeeded at that.
Yeah.
Right. Now, one example of how the script was misguided is there's the dialogue of this character, Yusuf Kasim. And for some reason, they made his dialogue 60s hipster beatnik. I'm not exactly sure what the word is. Hey baby, it's cool,
Right.
whatever. And it for me, it just didn't work because it seemed out of place for the rest of the movie. And it also forever froze the decade of the movie to the 60s.
Yep.
Because without his speaking style, this movie could have happened in any decade.
Yeah, I didn't like it either. I didn't like that either.
All right, so now another criticism of Arabesque is that the role of David Pollock was miscast.
Yeah.
And Dan and I disagree here. I think this is true. Dan actually likes Gregory Peck in this role.
Yeah, I do.
I think, Peck did try to make it work. I just think he was the wrong actor for the role. Now, David Pollock was originally written for Cary Grant, which is why we heard about Grant didn't want the role earlier. And Grant was filming the movie Walk, Don't Run, and he retired after doing it. He thought he was too old at 61 to play the romantic lead.
All right.
So I think it's too bad that he retired because I think Grant would have actually been a really good fit for this role for a couple reasons. And the first is this role has humor out of the Pollock character, and Grant, I think, would have pulled that humor off much better than Peck does. I mean, he
Okay.
it's kind of he has that personality in him and that talent. And second, I find Peck to be a bit stiff in his acting performances. And that works great for roles like Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, fantastic
Yeah.
performance there.
Right. Right.
And I'm not saying that Peck is not an excellent actor. He is. I just don't think he does humor all that well.
He is an
I mean,
excellent actor. I didn't mind him in this role, but I see the point. Cary Grant has that balance. Gregory Peck's not funny. I mean, his role he was a little bit the Kill a Mockingbird role here in terms of his seriousness because that's how he looks in general. So I think yeah maybe Cary Grant would have been better because like it would have been the same kind of role as in Arsenic and Old Lace and that kind of thing. He could pull that kind of stuff off and easily. And Gregory Peck, you could tell he struggled trying to be funny, but I thought he was okay, and I thought it was tolerable. Some of his lines, though, I thought he couldn't deliver. He couldn't deliver on the funny stuff or the things that were supposed to be kind of like okay, let that roll right off me kind of thing. It seemed a little stretched. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but you know what? The other thing, I think like Harrison Ford. You know, if he was older at the time, he could have played it off because it was another kind of thing where you have that balance of humor and seriousness like he did in Indiana Jones and stuff. And yeah,
Yeah, see now for me, I think an actor like James Coburn would the same year released The President's Analyst, or Roger Moore would have been a better fit. Remember, this was
yeah, yeah.
before Moore played James Bond, right?
Mhm.
I also think that part of the problem is that Arabesque feels a bit like North by Northwest, The 39 Steps, Notorious, or some other Hitchcock movie
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
with a heavy emphasis on North by Northwest, and that's not really what Peck normally plays.
Right. Yeah,
Now,
I agree.
let me give you an example of where I think it didn't work. And I think you and I disagree on this, Dan, because for me, that shower scene with Yasmin and David fell a little flat, and it shouldn't have. I mean, this
Mhm.
was a great idea. Show Sophia Loren naked in the shower,
Yeah.
and there was some tension in the scene, which Peck can do,
Mm.
but a lot of it I think should have been funny. I mean, Dan, you talk about facial reactions by actors all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Peck to me didn't deliver the comedy through his face that was needed for the scene. You saw the tension, but you didn't see the comedy. And I think with a more comedic actor, parts of this scene would have been absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, nah, you know what? As I said earlier, I think he used his eyes well to tell a story in the shower scenes. So I had no problem with the shower scenes. Like I said, some of the lines that he was given and were written for him, he had a hard time delivering because he's not that kind of funny, aloof kind of guy. But all
Okay,
right,
so I think we'll agree to disagree a little on this one.
yeah,
Right?
let's move.
To me, this was a great actor in the wrong role.
All right. Another criticism of the movie is its inconsistent tone. I, I don't know. In many of the other podcast episodes that we've done, we've talked about how an inconsistent tone is problematic. We get that here, somewhat, at least in Arabesque, but I'm not overly concerned with the inconsistent tone here. And what we mean by inconsistent tone is the movie didn't quite know what it wanted to be. Is it a spy thriller or is it a comedy? If you watch it, let us know what you think. But I don't know. It is a critique and it is legitimate in a sense, but I didn't have that kind of a problem. I thought the balance was okay.
Yeah, so this is another one where I actually think the inconsistent tone hurt it.
Okay.
Right? Because, well, we don't mind comedy being thrown into a spy movie or a spy movie being thrown into a comedy.
Yeah.
To me, it should be in small doses, or the juxtaposition is what the movie is all about. So think about the Melissa McCarthy movie Spy. I mean, that was a comedy spy movie and it worked.
Mhm.
However, in Arabesque, I don't think it quite did. I mean, the shower scene had a lot of comedy in it, and the comedy overshadowed the precarious position Yasmin and David were in that scene. And again, with the way Peck acted it, thought that fell flat.
All right.
And there was a lot of that in the movie where it was like we're throwing comedy in here, sometimes in scenes that it should be, and sometimes in scenes it shouldn't be. Because I think they were trying to make this light and humorous, but the story really isn't light and humorous.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the story it's a serious spy story, but Yeah, I think they did lean a little more towards the comedy, or at least the attempt at comedy, than the seriousness of it. All right. Lastly, I'd like to say that some of these scenes, like the hallucination scene, were way too long. Way too
Oh
long.
yeah.
We,
Oh yeah. I agree
we,
there.
we
Hey Dan,
also
I
see,
agree with you on that one.
yeah, I mean, we also see some stuff like the helicopter chase that was good and a bit reminiscent of From Russia with Love, but a little more unrealistic than the chase in From Russia with Love. And the ending is certainly a Bond-like ending as well. And we're not going to tell you what it
Absolutely.
is, but you'll see it when you get there.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are some of the criticisms of Arabesque. And why is it called Arabesque? All right. Well, the main players of the plot are Arab for sure. Now, Tom was thinking, oh, dancing in the beginning, he said.
Yeah, exactly. An arabesque to me is a ballet move. That's the only definition I knew of.
It is a ballet movement, but I don't think that has anything to do with this spy movie, really, because there's enough stuff here with Arabesque that makes it kind of an interesting name. Arabesque is a contrived, intricate pattern of verbal expression in Middle Eastern terms, so called by analogy with a decorative style in which flowers and fruit and sometimes other stuff, animal outlines appear. So it is a kind of a convoluted pattern, but it's a pattern, a form of artistic decoration that consists of surface decorations based on linear patterns and scrolling and all this foliage and all this other stuff that comes in. In Middle Eastern cultures, arabesque is a style of art and decoration that symbolizes the Islamic faith, the unity of nature, and the infinite nature of God. So, in this movie, we see some of that represented in the dialogue and the unfolding of the complicated plot, all interlacing throughout. So, I thought, hey, that's a pretty good name.
Okay, now with that definition, I give you that. And the hieroglyphics are kind of this arabesque kind of a feel
True. Yeah.
because
There
you've
you
got the
go.
flowers and some animals and stuff like that
Right. Yeah.
with rhythmic linear patterns. So it does make sense there. For me, my ignorance, I had no clue that was one of the definitions of the word arabesque.
Yeah, all right. You can think of dancing if you like. And Sophia Loren dancing. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right. All right. Let's wrap this up by talking about one of our favorite topics, the movie influencers. All right. Whew.
Now, so the first influencer on this movie that I want to talk about, what was
Yeah.
happening with spy movies at this time, excluding what EM Productions was doing with James Bond. Because
Okay.
this movie was released in 1966, which was the same year as Modesty Blaze, and a year after it, we got the Casino Royale spoof and the President's Analyst.
Mhm.
All of these spy movies had a dynamic style for the time, as well as innovative cinematography, which we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
And the drug or hallucination scenes had similar feels behind these movies. And these movies were also more comedic than the James Bond movies, especially Casino Royale and
Yeah.
The President's Analyst. That movie just cracks me up.
All right. Another influencer had to be the Alfred Hitchcock espionage movies. There is a lot in Arabesque that felt like scenes from North by Northwest for sure, and the 39 Steps.
Oh yeah, it's almost like a big part of this story just was ripped right out.
Yeah, I mean, there's even a chase through a cornfield that is very reminiscent of the famous crop duster scene in North by Northwest. And the climax had a feel of the Statue of Liberty scene from Hitchcock's Saboteur. So, yeah,
Yeah,
there's a scene.
it's definitely different, but it had that feel.
Yeah, and there's a scene in an aquarium that seems to have been influenced by Hitchcock's Sabotage, if you recall that movie. And there's also an assassination plot similar to The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Right. Now, another thing I really liked in here with the Hitchcock references is Professor David Pollock's face appears on the front page of the newspaper
Yes.
and is identified as a murderer.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened to Richard Haney in the 39 Steps. So
And
another
North by
Hitchcock reference.
Northwest.
And North by Northwest. Yeah. So hey, the Hitchcock references are definitely here in this.
Yeah, right.
So the next influencer is the theme of the reluctant spy. So this
Yes.
kind of goes hand in glove with what we've been talking about here is we've seen this used a lot by Hitchcock, and it's a solid way to present a spy story. And I think it's used very well here in Arabesque. Pollock wants to be a cipher expert, not a spy. This is just what he knows how to do, right? And he's thrown into the situation. And he doesn't always know what he should do. And he meets a woman who helps him, and he ends up saving the day, right? That's your classic reluctant spy thing. You've got a
Yeah.
man or a woman thrown into a situation. They're not sure what to do. They get help from the opposite sex and save the day.
Yeah. I was just amazed that they couldn't find another guy to go decipher the code. He's the only one in the world, and they focus on him. But other than that, okay.
Well, no, but Professor Ragib was in London, right? He was teaching at Oxford,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is where and Pollock was subbing for him. So it kind of made sense because they were in the same area.
In Arabesque, there is also a particular thing that appears that you have also seen in other movies, like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, Ring of Spies, and others.
Yeah. So we also saw them in Topaz, Tinker Tailor's Soldier Spy, Mission
Yeah.
Impossible 3, You Only Live Twice. Not sure if we've given you enough clues as to what this thing is, but there is a piece of technology that we see here that was used in all these other movies.
There you go.
Now, we also see a minor influencer. It's a short little thing here. When a henchman dies by being electrocuted.
Mm.
We saw something very similar happen to Oddjob and Goldfinger, which was released not that long before this movie. And another James Bond reference here, Dan.
Yeah.
And like many of the Eon Productions James Bond movies, the movie ends with two characters in a boat.
Yeah, you'll see that for sure. And of course, since it is a spy movie, there is of course, a train scene, but it's but it's brief. But there is no fighting or following of the protagonist here. So okay, but
Yeah, well, it was funny because when you see the train,
it's
like,
minimal.
oh yeah, it's a spy movie, but there's no spy stuff really associated with the train.
No,
But
no, no. But you got to have one in there. All right, let's look at some of the ways that Arabesque actually influenced later spy movies. All right, first, we have the visual innovations in this movie. We talked about that. Although we mentioned what was happening at the time, the colors, mirrors, and camera work all influenced most spy movies that followed it.
yeah, now the next influence I want to talk about here, Dan, is actually something we pointed out I thought was a negative, and that's the inconsistent tone.
Okay.
Right. To me, Arabesque had that am I a comedy, romance movie, or spy movie, right?
Mm.
And many spy movies since Arabesque have run into that same issue here. And as I mentioned, the Union a minute ago, we have to remember that not all influences are positive. And I think this is an influence that ended up being a negative.
Yeah. Another influence here is the warning of being disavowed if discovered. We've heard that before, haven't we? Here in Arabesque, we get the line, "My ambassador and I must disclaim any knowledge of you." Any Mission Impossible fans of either the TV show or the movies that know that line? Yes, we know that line, as always. Should you or any of your IM force be caught or killed, the secretary will disavow any knowledge of your actions. And this concept of disavowalment comes way before Mission Impossible. In the 1943 movie, The Adventures of Tartu, the main character there, Stevenson, is also told that after he crosses into Czechoslovakia, he's on his own, that the British powers can't be of much use to him. And once again, in the 1959 movie Operation Amsterdam, the spies are told, if caught, we cannot help you. It's interesting that the Mission Impossible TV series was released the same year as Arabesque.
Two things happening at the same time on the exact same topic.
All right.
We also get something similar here in more current movies: Salt, Spy Game, The Recruit, Body of Lies, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. Those are just some of them I can think of that we get this whole disavow thing happening.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a popular plot point because of the increased tension it adds to the drama.
Yeah.
I mean, if you blow it, we don't know you. I mean, that's a pretty powerful motivator, right? You're on your own if you screw this up.
I know nothing.
But it also leads to the redemption once the disavowed agent overcomes whatever he or she needs to do that got them disavowed in the first place.
Yep.
So it's really a great plot point because it has multiple angles that really give success to the protagonist.
Yeah, and we see other things that Arabesque has influenced in spy movies to come, right? The breaking of a water tank that spills its contents, which we see in Octopussy, License to Kill, and the first Mission Impossible movie as well. This is also seen in many other non-spy action movies like Lethal Weapon 2, Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo, Total Recall, and others. There's also a horse race, of course,
Well, you got to have a horse race in some of these
at
movies.
the Ascot racetrack, too. Come on, A View to a Kill also uses Ascot for a race scene. And in Mission Impossible 2, Randwick Racecourse in Sydney, Australia was used for its horse race scene. All of these scenes use the racecourse as a place for people to meet and pass along information.
Well, I love that because it is really a good setting for that because it's a reason that a bunch of people would get together. You could also do it like in a football match or cricket match or something like that, where you've got a bunch of people get together, random people, so it's easy to intermingle the people you need to have intermingle and pass along whatever information has to be passed along. So I think it's a really good trope, and it's
Okay.
really nice to see that here. All right, the next thing from an influencer is there's a point in the movie where Pollock reads a sign, and when he's reading the sign, he utters the phrase, "The plagues shall not pass until the swans fly high." The hell does that mean, right? Now, the interesting thing about this is if you're a fan of The Usual Suspects, the movie The Usual Suspects, Verbal Kint does this exact same trick with the same type of outcome. And so
Okay.
it's just one of those things that's kind of there that really becomes a really important part of The Usual Suspects. But here it's maybe a 2-minute thing.
Yeah. And in Funeral in Berlin, was released the same year as Arabesque. And in both movies, the protagonist gets help from a spy he doesn't know is a spy. It's been done in other movies, but interestingly, this theme comes in 2 movies in the same year.
Yeah,
So,
it just blows me
interesting.
away when that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah. All right. Arabesque is an international spy thriller in the sense of characters are from different parts of the world, but it was a London movie and filmed, of course, at Pinewood. It's entertaining and definitely worth a view. All right. That's a wrap of our decoding of the 1966 movie Arabesque. This has been Dan
And Tom.
of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our podcast show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Subscribe to our show and our YouTube channel as well. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it.